There for Care is brought to you by CareScout with the goal of sharing real-life conversations about aging care. Views expressed on this program are the speaker's own. We do not provide medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice. Always talk to your own professional advisors for advice tailored to your needs.
There's no book to tell you how to do it. There's no perfect way to do it. You're going to fail every day when you're trying to do it. And that's the way I felt many days. It was only a few months after we moved them in that my dad ultimately had his stroke, lost 90% of his vision. So this whole entire side, which meant he couldn't drive himself anywhere. He couldn't do doctor's appointments, grocery shopping. All of those things kind of became our responsibility to take care of. The important thing for me there was keeping my employer informed, making sure that my manager knew, here's what I'm going through, here's what I'm experiencing, this is where I'm at, these are the things that I know are coming.
So when you see those people that are in it right now, like you were in it, what are some things that you would share with them?
I would say, be kind to yourself for doing it. It's a choice, and you could say no, and they'd have to find someplace else to go. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Hi, welcome to the There for Care podcast by CareScout, a podcast about all things aging care, whether you're navigating it for yourself or for those you love. I'm Amy Rein, and today we've got Suzann Irvin, a senior manager of talent acquisition for Genworth. And Suzann's personal experience with caregiving started with her mom when she began to experience dementia, and then after a few years moved to a different level of commitment and experience as she was thrust into also becoming the primary caregiver for her father when he had a stroke and lost 90% of his vision. During all of that, Suzann was working, navigating care decisions, and trying to spend every last minute that she could with her parents. So we are going to talk to her about that experience and with boundaries and decisions and making it all work. Thank you for joining us today, Suzann.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So just in that intro, you have a tumultuous caregiving story, it sounds like. Can you just maybe level set us to get us started with your experience caregiving for your parents?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom and dad lived in a retirement community, a little apartment. And that's really the time that we started to see the dementia creeping in on my mom, of course, and went through testing and everything began to become clearer. And it was ultimately confirmed that that's what we were dealing with. And so after a period of time of them living there, we decided to ask them to look to move in across the street from us. So we rented a house directly across the street from our house so that they could still have their independence, but I could be a lot closer to them. And it was really a blessing in disguise because it was only a few months after we moved them in that my dad ultimately had his stroke. Lost 90% of his vision. So this whole entire side, which meant he couldn't drive himself anywhere. He couldn't do doctor's appointments, grocery shopping. All of those things kind of became our responsibility to take care of. And so, having to kind of step into that, my mom was still doing reasonably well at that point. So it kind of eased into things, I guess, if I had to say that. But, I was taking him and her to doctor's appointments, doing all their grocery shopping, going to get all of their medications, helping him there as well. But over time, as dementia does, it really started to eat away at my mom, and she became less and less herself and had less ability to really be able to do things for herself. She was immobile due to arthritis as well, so that kind of compounded it even more. And then it was only about a year and a half later that my dad was then diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer. So that's how things started to unfold for us. And we just kind of had to take it as it came. And luckily, my dad was very honest and open with me about the things that he wanted and that he had hoped for my mom as well. And one of those things, obviously, for him was never to put her into a nursing home or a care facility. He had always promised that he would be the one to take care of her. And so, as you can imagine, over the years, that became a big stumbling block for us, and to try to figure out how do we navigate through that.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine, up until your dad's stroke, was he the primary caregiver?
He was.
For your mother? So can you talk about that sort of transition?
Yeah.
Like, were you involved with your mom's care? Did you kind of have an idea of what to do, or was that
I was.
your first big step?
Once they moved in across the street, I think that's really what, catapulted me into it. Even though we weren't there yet, my dad was still her primary caregiver, but I was there constantly with them across the street, whether it was, hey, we made dinner tonight, bringing dinner over, just checking in, going over to sit down and watch TV with them and spend time with them. So I knew the things that he was doing for my mom and the particular ways that she liked to have things done and the way he wanted to make sure things were done. And so I did have that going into it. And when the stroke hit and then ultimately the cancer, I was there more and more. So at that point, I started to get there in the mornings. So for breakfast, I was there just to check in, make sure everyone was up, things were done. Did he need any help getting mom cleaned up and dressed, and medicines were taken? And then I would go back to work. I worked from home at that point, thank goodness. And then lunchtime, I would go back, check in, make sure everything was going well. And then evening, dinner time, go back in, check in, make sure that they had dinner. Again, is everything good? And then at bedtime, I'd go back again and, get my mom ready for bed and get her cleaned up and get her settled in the bedroom, which was always, that was probably the most difficult time of the day, quite honestly, Amy, for me, was bedtime with her, because the further into the evening we went, the more confused she became. Most of the time there towards the end, didn't know who I was, wasn't sure where she was at. And so trying to get her settled for bed was always a difficult thing to do. So, yeah.
Did you enlist help at any point, or what? What pushed you to that point?
Yeah. So I think, one of the things I would say is, when you find yourself in this situation, sometimes everything is moving so fast. I mean, I can imagine with one person, it's hectic. But then when you have two people and you're working, and I had a teenager in school at the time, you don't have time to look up and breathe sometimes. But then we learned about options that were available. My mom ended up on Medicaid to be able to support her care. And so we were able to then at that point have a nurse come in for a few hours each week to be able to provide some support, help get her bathed and take care of her. Many times, though, I was called in during that as well, because she wasn't sure who she was with and wanted to have someone else that, she may know during the day to be able to help out. But we did call in care. I do have several siblings. I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers. They all don't live local, though. I have a few that live about 45 minutes to an hour away, and another who was dealing with her own caregiving issues in downtown Richmond. And so as much as they tried to come and help, they would. There were many nights where someone needed to physically be there and stay there and sleep on the couch. And my sisters would try to take turns to come in and fill that gap so that at least I could try to get some sleep and then head back over, and we started all over the next day. Yeah.
With that many siblings, how did you make decisions about things as circumstances changed?
Yeah.
Or did you sort of take on that primary role, or was it consensus? Or
luckily, my dad was the leader of the family. So he knew what he wanted. He knew what he wanted for mom. And so we really took our lead from him at that point. And even though he was going through a terminal illness ultimately himself, he never lost his capability to make decisions. And so I took my lead from him. And he and I had very, very honest conversations, many times just he and I together. And then I would kind of convey that to my siblings and reach out to them and go over, this is what we're dealing with. Here are the decisions that we have to make. This is what Dad wants to do. I think we should do it, and here's why. Or I know this is what he wants to do, but I think we need to talk to him and maybe take this a different direction. So we tried to take the lead from Dad and give him the opportunity to make as much decision as he could for himself and for Mom. But there were times where we all had to kind of step in and make decisions. And did we always agree? No, we didn't, because the emotions were there. And I think when you're not face to face with it on a daily basis, it's very easy to say, no, I don't think we should do that. I think I think we should continue to try this way and continue to do this. But when you're hands-on and in the middle of it every day, it changes your perspective.
Yeah. When you make those decisions that start to depart from his wishes, or whether for himself or for your mom, like can you talk about that, what it feels like and how you know that you can't, it's not the right thing to do what they want to do.
Yeah. So we eventually were able to get my dad on the right page with what needed to happen for my mom. And I think it was because I talked to him about it constantly. And I reiterated the fact that she needs 24-hour care. I mean, the attempt that we're making here between me and you and a nurse on occasion is not giving her what she needs. She's not being taken care of to the level that you would want her to be taken care of, or that she would expect to be taken care of. And so getting him to buy into ultimately understanding that we had gotten to that point. And I think really for him, it was the cancer and the fact that it had spread and started to metastasize. And he became very weak. And as he started to become weaker, he started to realize that he wasn't able to do all of the things that he used to be able to do when I was absent. And those conversations became more frequent. And then ultimately, as much as he didn't want to make that decision, he finally did agree with us and allowed us to start to look for a facility for her.
How did you engage him in that? Did you sort of keep him involved as you looked for a place?
Yes. Yeah. He actually went on the tours of the facilities as well. I remember the first one. It was very difficult for him to go in, and you could see his emotions on his face as we were going through, seeing others that were there going through some of the same things, or that maybe were further along than what my mom was at that point. But he started to get the right mindset of what he needed to be looking for and what he wanted her to have. And ultimately, we were all able to kind of come to an agreement on a location for her, which ended up being a little bit further north, but closer to some of my other siblings, which was great, because even though we couldn't get to her as frequently as we might want to, they could visit her almost on a daily basis at that point. So all of those things combined help him get to that point of agreeing. And trust me when I say, even though he agreed, that leading up to that, prepping, because you have to prep the clothes and put their names in the clothes. And that was very difficult for him to see us packing up her things and knowing that that day was about to come. And then the day that we had to take her, that was a difficult day for all of us, because one of my sisters drove her, but we had to convince her that she was going to get help and that she'd ultimately come back. And that's what we had to tell her, to be able to get her down the stairs and out the door and in the car, that we were taking her somewhere that was going to help her, and it was going to get her the help and the care that she needed. And that was a devastating day for my dad. And I sat on the back stairs and just cried, because I knew I had not told her the whole truth. Which felt like one of the first times I think I felt in my heart like I had really lied to my mom. Mm-hmm. But I knew what we had to do to get her the care that she deserved at that point. Yeah. So it was difficult, and he didn't want to go see her as often because she was declining at such a rapid rate. And then his health was declining, which made it very hard for him to be able to get up and go. So it made him feel better that my other siblings were close and could be with her and see her. Pretty much someone was there on a daily basis to check in on her. Yeah.
It sounds like you kept very open lines of communication throughout the process, right? And making sure that he felt involved and had, continued to have the ability to have an opinion and, just space to share what he wanted and work through all of those emotions. And that sense of agency is very important.
It was important, and we were very lucky that he was still able to hear us and to understand and to be able to make those decisions, because they had been married for over 60 years, and they had dated for several before that. Wow. And so they had been together their entire lives, and he had always been there to take care of her and she to take care of him. And so it was really important to make sure that he felt like he still had an opportunity to make decisions for her and to do what was best for her.
Yeah. So while you're working through all of that and being a facilitator and a mediator and, you know, a child and a parent and all of that, you're also working.
Yeah.
Can you know, you talked about how you were there in the morning and you would go at lunch and at dinner and at night. Like, what was it like to hold down a job while you're also being the primary caregiver for two parents? Yeah.
If I think back on it, it feels like a blur, to be honest with you. It was almost like a Groundhog Day of get up and do it again, just get up and do it again, just get up and do it again. And I think, you know, you go into it thinking, I don't know how to do, like, I'm not prepared for this. I don't know how to do this. There's no book to tell you how to do it. There's no perfect way to do it. You're going to fail every day when you're trying to do it. And that's the way I felt many days. Like, you know, am I doing everything that I can possibly be doing? Am I as present as I can be? I think for work, as I said, I worked from home. So that was hugely valuable to be remote. When my dad was going through cancer treatments, I packed up my laptop every day and worked from whatever facility we were in when he was getting his radiation treatments or he was at the doctor or the ER visits that were unexpected. I was logging in from there when the doctors would leave and he was quiet and sleeping and no one else was in the room. I was trying to sign on and work. But the important thing for me there was keeping my employer informed, making sure that my manager knew, here's what I'm going through, here's what I'm experiencing, this is where I'm at, these are the things that I know are coming, and trying to set up a plan with them to be able to kind of work through that. And it wasn't always perfect. And did I work nights when I came back from their house across the street? I'd come back and log in and try to get caught up and do things. At times that was an escape, you know, to have that other purpose and just to do something else, or pop in and work on the weekends when I could. But just making sure that they stayed informed about where I was at and what I needed and what I was supporting at home. I think hiding that is the worst possible thing that you can do when you're going through it, because employers might not understand, well, why is she not signed on or why is she absent? And being honest and upfront was really important to make that work.
Yeah. How you were talking about you know, having that escape, right? That other sense of purpose in your role, like as you are coming to terms with your new identity as a caregiver to your parents, like was that sort of a push and a pull? Did you sort of compartmentalize? Like how did those two identities sort of interplay?
Yeah. When it first started with my parents, I mean, so I'm the baby of the family. I was home with my parents alone for years because all my other siblings had moved out. And I was very, very close to my mom and dad. And so when it first started, it was extremely emotional. It was so hard to accept that role and to see them going through what they were going through. But there came a point for me where I had to like switch into a different mode, and I had folders for each of them. I had copies of all of their doctor's reports, every insurance card, every medication, any piece of information. Every time we went to a doctor, I added another sheet to their notebooks. And my dad would say to the doctor, when they would ask him something, he'd say, I don't know, check with my nurse, you know? So I had to start operating in that way to almost separate myself from the emotion of what I was dealing with on a daily basis. And that's how I found that I was able to get through some of those things. But also, I started looking for ways to get out and exercise. I found an opportunity every day to at least get in 30 minutes to an hour. And that was not something I did before that. So I really focused on trying to get out there and do something just for myself, just to take a break away and not be a mom and not be a caregiver and not be an employee, but just be me. And that was super helpful for me mentally to kind of wipe the slate and come back in fresh.
What do you think it was about exercise if that was something you
Music
can
has
do.
always been a big, important part of our family. My mom and dad, huge Elvis fans, huge Randy Travis fans, especially my mom, huge Elvis fan. And so there was always music in our house. And so I started taking an exercise dance class. And it was very freeing for me to just spend that time like listening to music. And the music was changing every 3 to 4 minutes. And I was dancing around people, and I used to love to dance when I was in school and go to school dances. And so it just took me to a different place, and it just kind of made me forget for that period of time.
Yeah.
So that's really where I thought the benefit was.
Yeah. And I love just that aspect of finding joy, right? And I think if you look at the facts of your caregiving story, there's a lot of tragedy, right? And deep things. But when you talk about it, you smile, right? So can you maybe just talk a little bit about finding the joy, in your experience when you look back on your caregiving
Absolutely.
experience? Yeah.
I think, I already talked about music. And so those are things that stick out for me. So for my mom, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, bedtime was difficult. It was so difficult because she was scared. She was nervous. She wasn't sure where she was. Is it okay for me to stay here? Are these people okay with me sleeping in their bed? Like, that's the point we were at. Many times her not knowing who I was. You're such a nice lady to help me get ready for bed. So when we went into the bedroom, we would put on Elvis radio. And I would tell her, Elvis is going to sing you to sleep. You just lay back and relax, and Elvis is going to sing you to sleep. And sometimes I'd sit on the edge of the bed with her, and we would sing whatever song was on, because trust me, I probably know the words to all of them at this point. And we would sit together and sing whatever song was on, and that would start to calm her down, and then she would start to relax and lay back. And the amazing thing was, she didn't know who I was. She didn't know who most of my siblings were. She still knew my dad for the most part, but she knew all the words. She could still sing every word in the song, which was always amazing to me to experience. And same thing with my dad. So classic country was my dad's thing. And so we saved that to the radio in my car. And every doctor's appointment that we went to, every radiation appointment, it didn't matter where we were going. As soon as we got in the car, classic country came on. And he was an amazing singer. He had a beautiful voice. And so he would sing, I would sing. Sometimes we'd sing duets. And I still think about all of those moments today, or when a song comes on that, I specifically remember being with them when it comes on. And it takes me back to that, but not the bad stuff. It takes me back to the good stuff. And there was one particular song when my mom was going through testing, and she had gone in to get her MRI, the brain MRI. I sang this one Elvis song to her, was her absolute favorite, and they allowed me to go in the room with her because she was so scared about being in there. And I sang the same verse, because that one I could only remember one verse, but that's okay. She didn't care that I had sang the same verse for 30, 45 minutes straight. To be able to keep her calm while she was in there. And so today when I hear that song, I think about being with her and being able to help comfort her during a time that she was really scared and nervous. So it's gone from, for me, looking back on the difficulty of everything that was there and what I could focus on and what I lost during that time, or the pain that my dad was in when he was going through treatments. Now it's kind of switched for me to think about all of the positives that I had in between that we had to experience together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a choice that you made, that sort of shift, or do you think that's just sort of the benefit of time, right? That other things move into your memory and your consciousness, and the good stuff is what's left
I would say, I think it just came with time, honestly. I don't know when things shifted for me. When I lost my dad, so I lost my dad in 2016, and then my mom ultimately passed in 2019. I had been in that mode of care and keep everything straight and have the notebooks together and, have all of the information, to ultimately allowing myself to grieve for losing each one of them, and my grief of everything that I just watched them go through and experience. And then ultimately, somewhere over time, that started to switch. Do I still think about that at times? Sure. When I see someone else going through what I went through, or another family member dealing with cancer, it certainly takes me back. When someone else is telling me their story, it takes me back there. But for the most part, it's the positive things that I remember.
Yeah. So when you see those people that are in it right now, like you were in it, what are some things that you would share with them, or, you know, top 3 things, or however many? Yeah.
I would say be kind to yourself for doing it. It's a choice, and you could say no, and they'd have to find someplace else to go. But allow yourself to be happy about the fact that you're choosing to do it. It's going to be difficult, and accept that and know that, and to look for the good in every situation that you come across. I think that's one thing. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to share with others what you're experiencing and what you're going through. You might be surprised at what they say to you and what they can teach you along the way. And when someone offers help, don't say, "Oh no, thank you. I know. Yeah, I appreciate it, but that's okay." Take it. Take the help. You need it. You need that break, and you need that time to be able to step away and take care of yourself. And we certainly had that with my siblings, and there was time, you know, my neighbor would actually come over sometimes and sit with my mom when my dad and I were out. And, you know, you don't turn those things down. That's really, you know, how you can get through it, I think, is, you know, accepting all of the help that you can get and listening to what others have to share with you about their experience.
What's your favorite memory of your parents? I see you brought a picture of them with you today.
I did. Yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to show it, but I'm going to show it. Yeah. Wow. My mom and I, we used to do so much together when I was young, but she's a huge Harrison Ford fan, and by extension, so am I. Everyone here at Genworth knows that. But we went to see Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark at the theaters 35 times. 35
Seems
times.
Excessive.
She was a huge fan. And so, you know, that was way back when it took forever for something to come out, right, on VHS or you know, whatever it was at that point. I don't even remember. So, like, if you wanted to see it, you had to go to the theater and see it, and they kept them in the theater forever. So we went 35 times, and I think we knew it word for word. I still know it word for word to this day. And from that point, we went to see every single Indiana Jones movie together. And that is something that I don't think I will ever forget. And so every time an Indiana Jones or any kind of Harrison Ford movie came out, Mom, even when I wasn't living at home, you know, I'd reach out to her and we would go see it together, and then, you know, return the favor to her. And when they put them back in the theater, going to see it, the last one that came out, though, unfortunately, in the past couple of years, you know, she couldn't go with me, and it felt odd to be going to see something like that without her. And so I took a picture. I bought her a ticket, and I took her picture to the theater with me. But that's something that sticks out in my mind about my mom is, you know, we were always doing things together, spending time, whether it was crafts or going to the movies or just out riding around. And we just loved spending time together. For my dad, he loved to be outdoors all the time. He was a carpenter by trade. He was constantly outside dabbling and doing things at the house. And every weekend when I was growing up, we cooked crabs. It was a family staple. So as soon as the weather turned warm, one of his best friends owned a crabbing business, and he'd go get a bushel of crabs, and his brother would come up, and all of his kids would come up, and we'd all hang out outside. And I would always gravitate to my dad and hanging out with my dad while he was cooking the crabs so I could learn how to cook the crabs. So it's so funny because to this day, as soon as the weather ticks on that first warm, summery feeling day, it's like I can almost taste it in my mouth, like, oh, crabs. And I think about, I think about my dad, and to this day, we'll cook crabs as a family. And I think about my dad, like, overseeing it and telling you what you were doing wrong, and you got to put this in first. And it makes me laugh. But I loved spending that time with him and doing that with him. And even the time that we spent when he was sick in the car, singing duets together. Like, we would sit in the parking lot and finish a song together before we would go in. And are you ready to go in? Yep, let's go. So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And I think, that to have the caregiving experience that you had and to be able to sit and just be smiley about your memories, whether they were distant or even when you were in the thick of it, it speaks to the tremendous gift that caregiving can be. But I think, to your point, you have to make that choice, that affirmative choice that you're going to be there in that moment and help them through. But thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Of course.
I greatly appreciate it. And that was the There for Care podcast by CareScout. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends that are going through a caregiving journey. See you next time.